Get that woman out of my operating room before I have her arrested. Dr. Harrison Pierce, the highest-paid obstetrician in the country, pointed a bloody-gloved finger at the cleaning woman standing in the doorway. His voice echoed off the sterile walls of the private surgical suite, drowning out the frantic beeping of monitors that screamed one truth nobody wanted to accept. The baby was dying, and so was the mother. The cleaning woman did not move. She stood there in her faded blue uniform, a mop still clutched in her weathered hands, her eyes fixed not on the furious doctor, but on the woman lying on the table. The woman whose face had gone gray. The woman whose heartbeat was becoming a whisper. I said, "Get her out." Dr. Pierce screamed. 2 security guards rushed forward, grabbing the cleaner by her arms. But before they could drag her away, she spoke 7 words that stopped everyone in the room. "The cord is wrapped twice." "Check again." Silence. Dr. Pierce stared at her, his face cycling through confusion, rage, and something that looked almost like fear. "We already checked," he snarled. "We have ultrasound. We have the best equipment money can buy. Who the hell do you think you are?" The cleaning woman met his gaze, and in her eyes was something that did not belong to a woman who scrubbed floors for minimum wage. "I'm the woman who is going to save that baby," she said quietly. "If you let me. But we need to go back. Back to how this moment came to be. Back to the morning when everything began to fall apart. 12 hours earlier, Victoria Ashworth had woken up in her husband's arms, feeling the first contraction ripple through her body like a wave of fire. "Marcus," she whispered, gripping his shoulder. "It is time." Marcus Ashworth, founder and CEO of Ashworth Industries, a man whose net worth exceeded the GDP of small nations, was out of bed before she finished speaking. He was a man who commanded boardrooms, who bent markets to his will, who had never encountered a problem that money could not solve. Within 30 minutes, a private medical helicopter landed on the rooftop helipad of their estate. Within an hour, Victoria was being wheeled into the most exclusive private hospital in the state, a facility that catered only to the ultra-wealthy and the extremely powerful. Marcus had spared no expense. 12 of the world's leading obstetricians had been flown in over the past month, each one on standby. Each one paid a retainer that would have funded a public hospital for a year. The delivery suite had been prepared with equipment that most hospitals could only dream of. Everything was perfect. Everything was ready. And yet, from the very first moment, something was wrong. Victoria's labor did not progress the way the textbooks said it should. The contractions came too fast, then too slow. The baby's heart rate spiked, then plummeted. The monitors screamed warnings that sent nurses running and doctors huddling in urgent whispered conferences. "What is happening?" Marcus demanded, grabbing Dr. Pierce by the arm. "You said this would be routine. You said there was nothing to worry about." Dr. Pierce's face was pale. "There are some complications, Mr. Ashworth. The baby is in distress. We're doing everything we can. Do more. Mr. Ashworth, I assure you, my team is the best in the world. Then why is my wife screaming? Why are those machines making that sound? Why does everyone in this room look like they are watching someone die?" Dr. Pierce had no answer. If you want to know what secret is causing this crisis and who the mysterious cleaner really is, subscribe to this channel right now, hit the like button, and comment what you think is going to happen next. Trust me, you are not prepared for this. The hours crawled by like years. One doctor after another stepped up to the table, each one confident, each one certain that they would be the one to solve the puzzle. Each one failed. They tried every drug in their arsenal. They tried every technique in their training. They consulted via video link with specialists on 3 continents. Nothing worked. The baby would not come. And with each passing hour, the baby grew weaker. The heartbeat that had been so strong that morning became a fragile flutter, a whisper of life that threatened to fall silent at any moment. Victoria drifted in and out of consciousness, her body exhausted, her spirit fading. In her lucid moments, she reached for Marcus's hand, and the terror in her eyes was something he would carry for the rest of his life. "Save our baby," she whispered. "Promise me." "I promise," Marcus said, though he had never felt more powerless in his entire existence. He was a man who could buy anything. Companies, politicians, islands, He had once purchased an entire hospital just to ensure his mother received the best cancer treatment available. But he could not buy his child's life. He could not buy more time. Outside the delivery suite, in a hallway that gleamed with expensive marble and soft lighting, a woman pushed a mop across the floor. Her name was Grace. Nobody knew her last name. Nobody had ever asked. She was invisible to the people who walked these halls, the wealthy and powerful who came to this hospital expecting miracles and rarely bothering to look at the staff who cleaned up after them. Grace was 53 years old. Her hands were rough from decades of manual labor. Her back ached from years of bending over mops and scrub brushes. Her uniform was faded from too many washes, and her shoes had holes that she had patched with cardboard. She had worked at this hospital for 7 years, and in all that time, she had never spoken more than a handful of words to anyone. But tonight was different. Tonight, she had been mopping the same stretch of hallway for 3 hours, her movements slow and mechanical, her eyes fixed on the doors to the delivery suite. She knew what was happening in that room. She had heard the whispered conversations of nurses rushing past. She had seen the parade of famous doctors arriving with their expensive equipment and their confident smiles. She had watched those same doctors emerge hours later with their confidence shattered and their faces gray with failure. And she knew something they did not. She knew why the baby would not come. Grace leaned her mop against the wall and walked toward the delivery suite doors. A nurse stepped into her path immediately. "Excuse me, you cannot be here. This is a restricted area." Grace did not stop walking. "Ma'am, I said you cannot." "The mother," Grace said quietly. "She had a procedure. Years ago, a cervical circlage. It was never removed." The nurse blinked. "What? How would you possibly know that?" "Because I was there when they put it in." The doors to the delivery suite burst open before the nurse could respond. A young resident rushed out, his face white with panic. "We are losing them both. Dr. Pierce is calling time of death on the baby. There is nothing more we can do." Grace pushed past him and walked into the room. The scene that greeted her was chaos. 12 of the world's best doctors stood around a table where a woman lay dying. Monitors screamed. Nurses shouted. Blood pooled on pristine white sheets. And in the corner, a man in a $10,000 suit sat with his head in his hands, his shoulders shaking with sobs he could not contain. Grace walked through it all like a ghost. She reached the table and looked down at Victoria Ashworth's gray face. Then she looked at the monitors. Then she looked at the positioning of the doctor's hands. "Move," she said to Dr. Pierce. He spun around, his face contorting with fury. "Who let this woman in here?" "Security. The circlage stitch," Grace said, her voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. "From her procedure in 2019. It was never fully removed. There is scar tissue blocking the cervix. That is why the baby cannot descend. That is why every intervention has failed." Dr. Pierce stared at her. "That is impossible. We did a full workup. Every scan, every test, your scans were looking for the wrong thing." Grace stepped closer to the table. "I have seen this before. The scar tissue does not show up on standard imaging. You need to do a manual examination, and you need to do it now. This is absurd. I'm not going to take medical advice from a cleaning woman. Then you're going to watch a mother and baby die." The room went silent. Marcus Ashworth lifted his head from his hands. His eyes, red and swollen from tears, fixed on Grace with desperate intensity. "Do it," he said to Dr. Pierce. "Do what she says." "Mr. Ashworth, I must insist I am not asking." Marcus's voice had shifted into something cold and dangerous. "I'm telling you, do what she says, or I will have your license revoked before sunrise." Dr. Pierce hesitated for one long moment. Then, with visible reluctance, he turned back to Victoria. 3 minutes later, his face went white. "My God," he whispered. "She is right. There is scar tissue. Dense scar tissue, exactly where she said it would be. How do we miss this?" Grace did not answer. She was already moving, positioning herself at Victoria's side, her rough hands suddenly gentle as they pressed against the laboring woman's abdomen. "I need a scalpel," she said, "and everyone needs to step back." "You cannot be serious," Dr. Pierce sputtered. "You're not a doctor. You cannot perform a procedure. I'm not going to perform a procedure." Grace looked at him with eyes that held decades of secrets. "I'm but to guide you through one, because I have done this before, many times, in places where there were no fancy machines and no 12 doctor teams. Just me and a mother who needed help." She turned those eyes to Marcus. "Your wife is going to live. Your baby is going to live. But I need you to trust me." Marcus Ashworth, a man who trusted no one, looked at this invisible woman in her faded uniform and saw something he had not seen in any of the 12 world-renowned doctors he had hired. Certainty. "Do it," he said. And in that moment, everything changed. What happens next will leave you speechless. How does a cleaning woman know so much about medicine? What is she hiding? Hit that subscribe button, leave a comment with your theory, and keep watching because the truth is more shocking than you can imagine. End of Part 1, Part 2. Escalation and secrets unravel. Grace's hands moved with a precision that did not belong to a woman who scrubbed floors. She directed Dr. Pierce with quiet authority, her voice calm and steady even as the monitors continued their frantic screaming. Her instructions were specific, technical, delivered in the language of someone who had spent years in operating rooms. "Gentle pressure here. No, not there. Here. Feel the scar tissue? That ridge beneath your fingers? That is what has been blocking the descent. You need to release it, but carefully. Too much force, and you will cause hemorrhaging." Dr. Pierce followed her directions, his earlier arrogance replaced by something that looked almost like awe. The other 11 doctors stood in a semicircle, watching in stunned silence as a cleaning woman orchestrated the procedure they had all failed to perform. "Now," Grace said, "the baby is going to move. I need suction ready, and someone prepare the warming station. This child is going to need immediate attention." 10 minutes later, a cry pierced the air. It was the most beautiful sound Marcus Ashworth had ever heard. His daughter emerged into the world screaming, her tiny fists clenched in fury, her lungs announcing her arrival with all the indignation of someone who had been kept waiting far too long. Victoria's eyes fluttered open at the sound. Tears streamed down her cheeks as a nurse placed the squalling infant on her chest. "She's perfect," Victoria whispered, her voice hoarse. "Marcus, look at her. She's perfect." Marcus could not speak. He stood frozen at his wife's side, watching his daughter's tiny fingers curl around her mother's, and felt something crack open inside his chest. All the money, all the power, all the empires he had built, none of it compared to this moment. He was a father. His child was alive, and he owed it all to a cleaning woman whose name he did not even know. He turned to find her, but Grace had already slipped away. The chaos of the delivery room had masked her exit, and by the time he reached the hallway, she was gone. Only her mop remained, propped against the wall where she had left it. Marcus picked up his phone. "Victor, I need you to find someone. A cleaning woman. She works here at the hospital. Gray hair, blue uniform, about 50 years old. Her first name is Grace." His head of security was on the task within seconds. But Grace, it turned out, was very good at not being found. Subscribe now and hit that notification bell, because what Marcus discovers about Grace's past will change everything you think you know about this story. And drop a comment telling me who you think Grace really is. 3 days later, Victoria and the baby, whom they named Hope, were discharged from the hospital. The doctors had performed every test imaginable, and both mother and daughter were healthy. The crisis had passed, but Marcus could not let it go. He was not a man who accepted mysteries. His entire life had been built on information, on knowing things that others did not, on using that knowledge to build power. And this woman, this Grace, had information that he desperately needed to understand. How had she known about the circlage? How had she known about the scar tissue? How had she been able to guide a procedure that 12 world-class doctors had failed to perform? Victor's report arrived on the 4th day. "Her full name is Grace Elena Mbeki," Victor said, sliding a thin folder across Marcus's desk. "She has worked at the hospital for 7 years. Before that, she worked at a series of cleaning jobs throughout the city. Goes back about 12 years. And before that, Victor hesitated. Before that, there is nothing." Marcus looked up sharply. "Nothing." Her identity appears to start 12 years ago. Before 2012, Grace Elena Mbeki did not exist. No birth certificate, no social security number, No employment history. Nothing. Marcus opened the folder. Inside was a single photograph, a staff ID picture showing a tired woman with gray-streaked hair and eyes that had seen too much. Someone with medical knowledge that advanced does not just appear out of nowhere, Marcus said. She knew things that specialists missed. She guided a surgical procedure without hesitation. That kind of expertise takes decades to develop. I agree, sir, which is why I dug deeper. Victor produced a second folder, thicker than the first. I ran her photograph through every database I could access. International records, medical licensing boards, immigration files. And I found something. He opened the folder to reveal a newspaper clipping, yellowed with age, printed in a language Marcus did not recognize. This is from a medical journal in Zimbabwe, dated 1998. It profiles a young doctor named Dr. Grace Moyo. She was considered one of the most brilliant obstetricians of her generation. Trained in London, practiced throughout Africa, saved countless lives in areas where medical resources were scarce. Marcus looked at the photograph accompanying the article. The woman in the picture was young, vibrant, smiling. But the eyes were the same. What happened to her? Victor's expression darkened. In 2003, there was a political upheaval in Zimbabwe. Dr. Moyo was running a clinic in a rural area when government forces arrived. They were looking for someone she had treated, a political dissident. She refused to give up her patient's location. He paused. They burned down the clinic, killed everyone inside. Patients, nurses, her entire staff. 23 people. She was the only survivor. Marcus felt something cold settle in his chest. After that, Victor continued. Dr. Grace Moyo disappeared. The government claimed she had died in the fire. But there were rumors that she had escaped, that she had fled the country using false documents. She was smuggled through a network of refugees, moving from country to country, always one step ahead of the people hunting her. Hunting her? Why would they still be hunting her? Because of what she knew, the dissident she protected. He was not just any political figure. He was the brother of the current president. And Dr. Moyo knew secrets about the regime, medical records that could prove human rights violations. Bacchimus, the kind of information that could bring down a government. Marcus stared at the photograph of the young doctor who had become a cleaning woman. She has been hiding for 20 years. Yes, sir, and doing a remarkable job of it. She gave up her entire identity, her career, everything she had built to stay alive, to keep the secrets she carries safe. Marcus closed the folder. I want to meet her. Victor Naidid. I thought you might say that. I have located her address. She lives in a one-room apartment in the Bronx. I can have a car ready within the hour. No car. No security team. I'll go alone. Victor's eyebrows rose. Sir, that is not advisable. She saved my wife and my daughter. The least I can do is not show up at her door with armed guards. The apartment building was exactly what Marcus had expected, and yet seeing it still hit him like a physical blow. The hallway smelled of mildew and cooking grease. The walls were stained with water damage. The elevator had been broken for so long that someone had pasted a handwritten sign on the doors that simply read, "Don't bother." He climbed 4 flights of stairs and knocked on the door of apartment 4C. For a long moment, there was no response. Then, slowly, the door opened a crack, and a single eye peered out at him. Mr. Ashworth. Grace's voice was resigned, unsurprised. I wondered how long it would take you to find me. May I come in? She studied him for a moment, then stepped back, opening the door wider. The apartment was tiny, a single room that served as bedroom, living room, and kitchen. The furniture was old but clean. The only decoration was a small photograph on the windowsill, showing a group of smiling people in medical scrubs standing in front of a modest building. Your clinic, Marcus said, recognizing it from Victor's file. Grace did not respond. She walked to the small stove and began making tea, her movements automatic. I know who you are, Marcus said. Dr. Grace Moyo, one of the most brilliant obstetricians of her generation. A woman who saved hundreds of lives before she was forced to disappear. Grace's hands paused over the kettle. That woman died 20 years ago. No, she didn't. She just stopped living. Grace turned to face him. In the harsh light of the bare bulb overhead, she looked every one of her 53 years. "Why are you here, Mr. Ashworth? To offer me money? To expose me? To drag me back into a world I left behind? I'm here to understand. You saw something in that delivery room that 12 world-class doctors missed. You saved my wife and my daughter when everyone else had given up. How?" Grace was silent for a long moment. Then she walked to the window and looked out at the gray cityscape beyond. "Your wife," she said quietly. "I knew her before that night." Marcus went still. "What?" "In 2019, she came to a free clinic in Brooklyn. She was pregnant for the first time, but she did not want anyone to know. She was afraid," she said. "Afraid that her husband would find out before she was ready to tell him." Marcus's heart began to pound. "Victoria never told me about a pregnancy in 2019 because she lost it. Miscarriage at 11 weeks. She was devastated. I performed the procedure to remove the remaining tissue. And afterward, I placed a circlage, a preventive stitch, because she asked me to. She wanted to be prepared for her next pregnancy. She wanted everything to be perfect for you." Grace turned to face him. "I told her the stitch would need to be removed before any future delivery. I gave her detailed instructions. I even wrote it in her medical record." "Then why didn't the other doctors know?" "Because the clinic lost its funding 6 months later. It closed down. All the records were supposed to be transferred, but something went wrong. The files were lost, or misfiled, or destroyed. And your wife, she never mentioned it to anyone. Perhaps she forgot. Perhaps she was too embarrassed. Perhaps she simply trusted that the medical system would keep track of these things." Grace's voice grew heavy with grief. "But systems fail, Mr. Ashworth. Records get lost. People fall through the cracks. And sometimes the only thing standing between life and death is a cleaning woman who happened to recognize a patient from 4 years ago." Marcus sank into a chair, his mind reeling. His wife had been pregnant before. She had lost their child. She had carried that grief alone, never telling him, trying to protect him from pain. And the woman who had helped her through that darkest moment had somehow found her way back, just in time to save her again. "Why were you at the hospital that night?" he asked. "You said you worked there, but that floor, that wing, it was supposed to be off limits to cleaning staff during the procedure." Grace smiled sadly. "Because I knew she was coming. I saw her name on the admission schedule 3 days earlier. I remembered her immediately. And I saw the preparations being made, all those famous doctors, all that expensive equipment, and I had a feeling, a terrible feeling that something was going to go wrong. So you came anyway." I mopped the same hallway for 3 hours, waiting, listening. And when I heard the panic in their voices, when I heard them talking about calling time of death, she closed her eyes. I could not let it happen. Not again. Again. Grace opened her eyes, and in them Marcus saw a grief so deep it seemed bottomless. The night the soldiers came to my clinic, there was a woman in labor. Her name was Amara. She was 17 years old, and she was so afraid. The soldiers burst in before I could deliver the baby. They shot her husband first, right in front of her. Then they set the fire. Tears began to stream down Grace's weathered cheeks. I tried to save her. I tried to get her out. But the smoke was too thick, and she was too weak, and the baby was stuck, just like your daughter was stuck. I had to choose. Stay and deliver the baby, or run and survive. What did you do? Grace's voice broke. I ran. I left her there. I left Amara and her baby to die in the fire because I was too afraid to stay. She covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking. For 20 years, I have carried that shame. Every night, I see her face. Every night, I hear her screaming my name as the flames took her. And every day, I scrub floors and empty trash cans, telling myself that I do not deserve to be a doctor anymore, that I lost the right to save lives when I failed to save hers. Marcus rose from his chair and crossed the room. He stood before this broken woman, this ghost of a healer, and he did something he had not done since he was a child. He put his arms around her and let her cry. "You saved my wife," he said quietly. "You saved my daughter. Whatever happened 20 years ago, whatever choices you made to survive, you found your way back. You found your way back to that delivery room at exactly the right moment. That has to mean something." Grace pulled back, wiping her eyes. "It means I got lucky." One time, it does not erase what I did. Maybe not, but maybe it's a start. If this story is hitting you in the heart, do not forget to like this video and leave a comment. Tell me what you think should happen to Grace. Should she practice medicine again? Should Marcus help her? I want to hear your thoughts. Marcus left the apartment that night with more questions than answers. But as he rode home to his wife and newborn daughter, one thing was clear. Grace Moyo had spent 20 years punishing herself for a choice she made in an impossible moment. She had buried her gifts, hidden her brilliance, and resigned herself to a life of invisibility. And Marcus Ashworth, a man who had built his fortune on seeing potential where others saw nothing, was not going to let that continue. He reached for his phone and dialed his lawyer. I need you to research something. International medical licensing. Specifically, how to reinstate the credentials of a doctor who has been out of practice for 2 decades. And I need it done quietly. Sir, that is a complicated process. I don't care how complicated it is. Make it happen. He ended the call and looked out the window at the city lights streaming past. Grace had saved his family. Now he was going to save her. But what he did not know, what he could not possibly know, was that Grace's past was not finished with her yet. And the men who had burned down her clinic 20 years ago had finally found her trail. End of Part 2, Part 3. Revelation. Justice and emotional payoff. The first sign of danger came 3 weeks later. Marcus had spent those weeks quietly working behind the scenes, pulling strings, calling in favors, laying the groundwork for Grace's return to medicine. He had established a scholarship fund in her name. He had reached out to hospital boards. He had even begun construction on a new community clinic in the Bronx, designed specifically with her input. Grace had resisted at first. She had insisted that she did not deserve it, that she was content with her invisible life, that she wanted nothing more than to be left alone. But Marcus could be persuasive when he wanted to be. And Victoria, once she learned the truth about the woman who had saved her twice, became Grace's fiercest advocate. "You gave me back my life," Victoria told her during one of their many conversations. "You gave me my daughter. I am not going to let you waste the rest of yours scrubbing floors." Slowly, reluctantly, Grace began to hope again. And then, on a cold Tuesday morning, she disappeared. Marcus received the call from Victor at 7 in the morning. "Sir, we have a problem. Grace did not show up for her shift at the hospital yesterday. Her apartment has been cleared out. No forwarding address, no note, nothing." Marcus felt ice form in his stomach. "Find her. I'm already working on it. But sir, there is something else. I flagged some unusual activity in the past few weeks. Someone has been accessing international databases, searching for information about Dr. Grace Moyo. The searches originated from an IP address in Harare, Zimbabwe. They had found her." Marcus was out of his chair before Victor finished speaking. "I need every resource we have. Private investigators, security teams, anyone with contacts in Africa. She cannot have gone far. She has no money, no passport, no. Actually, sir, she does have a passport. I found records of one being issued to her false identity 3 years ago. And there was a ticket purchased yesterday. One way to London." "London? Why London?" Victor hesitated. "Because that is where the International Criminal Court is preparing to hear testimony on human rights violations in Zimbabwe. The testimony of witnesses who survived the 2003 massacres. Grace's name is on the list of people they have been trying to locate for years." Marcus understood immediately. Grace was not running from her past. She was running toward it. This is where everything comes together. If you're not subscribed yet, now is the time. Hit that button and ring the bell because the ending of this story will stay with you forever. And leave a comment telling me if you think Grace should testify or stay hidden. Marcus caught up with her at Heathrow Airport. She was sitting in a quiet corner of the international terminal, a small bag at her feet, her hands wrapped around a paper cup of tea that had long since gone cold. She did not look surprised when he sat down beside her. "You should not have come," she said quietly. "You should not have left without saying goodbye." Grace smiled, but there was no joy in it. "I received a message last week from a woman I knew in the camps, another survivor. She told me that the court has finally gathered enough evidence to bring charges against the men who destroyed my clinic, who killed Amara. who killed 23 innocent people. But they need witnesses. People who can testify to what happened. People who saw the soldiers' faces, who can identify commanders, who can provide medical evidence of the atrocities committed. She turned to look at him, and in her eyes was a resolve he had not seen before. For 20 years, I have been hiding. For 20 years, I have been telling myself that survival was enough. But it is not enough, Mr. Ashworth. Not when the men who murdered my patients are still in power. Not when they're still hurting people. Not when I have the chance to stop them. They will kill you. Perhaps. The moment you step into that courtroom, you become a target. I have always been target. The only difference is that now I am choosing to stop running. Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying this remarkable woman who had spent 2 decades pretending to be invisible. You saved my daughter, he said finally. You saved my wife. I cannot repay that, but I can make sure you do not face this alone. Grace shook her head. This is not your fight. It is now. He pulled out his phone and made a call. Victor, I need a full security detail assembled. The best people you can find. I also need legal representation, international specialists who know how to protect witnesses in high-profile cases. And I need it all in The Hague by tomorrow morning. Grace stared at him. Mr. Ashworth, Marcus, after everything we have been through, I think you can call me Marcus. Marcus, you do not understand what you are getting into. These are dangerous people. They have killed before, and they will not hesitate to kill again. I've spent my entire life being underestimated. People look at me and see a man who got lucky, who was born into privilege, who has never faced a real challenge. They do not see the years I spent building an empire from the scraps my father left behind. They do not see the enemies I have crushed, the betrayals I have survived, the wars I have won. He leaned forward, his eyes intense. I am not afraid of dangerous people. I am a dangerous person, and right now, I am choosing to be dangerous on your side. The courtroom in The Hague was smaller than Grace had expected. For something that was supposed to change the course of history, it was remarkably ordinary. Wooden benches, fluorescent lights, translators speaking quietly into microphones. But the men sitting at the defendant's table were not ordinary. General Solomon Mwangi, Colonel Peter Shimidza, Lieutenant Commander Isaiah Nyathi, the 3 men who had ordered the massacre at Grace's clinic, the 3 men who had killed Amara and her unborn baby, the 3 men who had haunted her nightmares for 20 years. They sat in their expensive suits, their faces composed, their lawyers whispering reassurances. They looked like businessmen at a board meeting, not monsters who had burned children alive. Grace felt her hands begin to shake. She was sitting in the witness gallery, waiting for her turn to testify. Around her, a security team that Marcus had assembled kept watch, their eyes scanning every entrance, every movement. And beside her, holding her hand, was Victoria Ashworth. You can do this, Victoria whispered. You have been doing this alone for 20 years. But you are not alone anymore. Grace squeezed her hand and did not let go. When the prosecutor called her name, she rose on legs that trembled but did not fail. She walked to the witness stand and placed her hand on the Bible. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Grace looked at the 3 men who had destroyed her life. She looked at the judges who held the power to deliver justice. She looked at the gallery full of survivors and families and journalists who had waited decades for this moment. Ido. And then she began to speak. She told them about the clinic, about the patients who came from miles around, walking for days to receive medical care, about Amara, the 17-year-old girl with the beautiful smile who had named her unborn baby Tendai, which meant be thankful. She told them about the night the soldiers came, the screaming, the gunfire, the flames. She told them about the choice she had made, the choice that had haunted her for 20 years. How she had run when she should have stayed. How she had survived when so many others had died. And she told them about the evidence she had carried with her ever since. Medical records she had smuggled out in the chaos. Photographs of injuries that proved systematic torture. Documents signed by the very men sitting at the defendant's table. When she finished, the courtroom was silent. General Mwangi's lawyers tried to discredit her. They called her a liar, a fraud, a woman with a vendetta. They pointed to her years of hiding and asked why the court should trust someone who had lived under a false identity for 2 decades. Grace answered every question with the calm precision of a surgeon. "I hid because I was afraid," she said. "I hid because I wanted to live. But I never forgot. I never stopped carrying the truth. And now, finally, I am able to set it down." The trial lasted 3 weeks. When the verdict came, the entire world was watching. Guilty. All 3 defendants, guilty on all counts. Crimes against humanity. Crimes. Mass murder. General Mwangi, the man who had given the order to burn Grace's clinic, was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Grace sat in the gallery and wept. Not tears of triumph. Not tears of revenge. Tears of release. For the first time in 20 years, the weight she had been carrying was finally gone. 6 months later, the Ashworth Community Clinic opened its doors in the Bronx. It was a modest building, nothing like the gleaming towers of Manhattan or the exclusive facilities where the wealthy receive their care. But inside, it was equipped with everything a community could need. Prenatal care, pediatrics, family medicine, mental health services. And at the center of it all, wearing a white coat for the first time in 2 decades, stood Dr. Grace Moyo. Her medical license had been reinstated after an extensive review process. The board had been hesitant at first, but Marcus Ashworth's influence, combined with Grace's testimony at The Hague, had convinced them to make an exception. On opening day, a line of patients stretched around the block. Marcus and Victoria came with baby Hope, who was now a chubby, giggling 6-month-old with her mother's eyes and her father's stubborn chin. They stood with Grace as she cut the ribbon, cameras flashing, reporters calling out questions. But Grace was not looking at the cameras. She was looking at the first patient in line, a young woman, barely out of her teens, with a swollen belly and fear in her eyes. "I heard about this place," the young woman said nervously. "They said you help people who cannot afford to go anywhere else. Is that true?" Grace smiled, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, the smile reached her eyes. "That is true. What is your name?" "Tendai." "My name is Tendai." Grace went very still. "Tendai, be thankful." The same name that Amara had chosen for her unborn baby all those years ago. She looked at this young woman, this stranger who had walked into her clinic with a baby on the way and hope in her heart, and she felt the universe shifting into place around her. Some things were coincidence, some things were fate, and some things were simply the world's way of telling you that your story was not over yet. "Come with me, Tendai," Grace said, taking the young woman's hand. "Let's take care of you." That night, after the clinic had closed and the staff had gone home, Grace sat alone in her new office. On her desk was the photograph from her old apartment, the one showing her staff standing in front of the clinic that no longer existed. She had carried it with her for 20 years, a reminder of everything she had lost. But now, beside it, she placed a new photograph. It showed Grace standing between Marcus and Victoria, holding baby Hope in her arms. Behind them, the Ashworth Community Clinic gleamed in the sunlight. And all around them, a crowd of patients and staff and community members smiled for the camera. A new family, a new purpose, a new beginning. There was a knock at the door. Victoria entered, carrying 2 cups of tea. "I thought you might still be here," she said, settling into the chair across from Grace's desk. "Marcus is outside with Hope. He wanted to give us a moment." Grace accepted the tea gratefully. "You did not have to come back. It has been a long day. I wanted to." Victoria paused, her expression growing serious. "I never properly thank you for everything, not just for saving my life or Hope's life, but for being there for years ago when I was alone and afraid and did not know where else to turn." Grace reached across the desk and took Victoria's hand. "You do not have to thank me. That is what doctors do. That is what I was always supposed to do. I just forgot for a while." Victoria squeezed her hand. "Well, for what it is worth, I'm glad you remembered." They sat together in comfortable silence, 2 women whose lives had intersected at the most vulnerable moments, bound together now by something stronger than blood. Finally, Victoria spoke again. "Marcus told me something the other day. He said that when he first met you, when you walked into that delivery room and told all those famous doctors that they were wrong, he knew immediately that you were special. He said he could see it in your eyes." "See what?" someone who was not going to give up, someone who would keep fighting even when everyone else had stopped, someone who understood that saving one life, just one, is worth any sacrifice. Victoria smiled. He said you reminded him of himself. Grace laughed, the sound surprising her. I remind him of himself? The billionaire CEO who flies in doctors on private helicopters and buys hospitals on a whim. The orphan who was told he would never amount to anything. The young man who built an empire from nothing because he refused to accept that his story was already written. The father who sat in that delivery room and would have traded everything he had, every penny, every company, every asset, just to hear his daughter cry. Victoria leaned forward. Money did not save me, Grace. Status did not save me. 12 famous doctors did not save me. You did. A woman with nothing but her knowledge, her courage, and her willingness to step into a room where she did not belong. She stood up and walked to the door. That is why Marcus built this clinic. Not as charity, not as a tax write-off, but as a monument to the truth he learned that night. What truth? Victoria paused in the doorway, her silhouette framed by the light from the hallway. That the people we overlook are often the ones who save us, and that the hands we consider beneath us are often the hands that lift us up. She smiled one last time. Welcome back, Dr. Moyo. The world missed you. After she left, Grace sat alone in the quiet of her office, surrounded by the ghosts of everyone she had lost and the hopes of everyone she might still save. She thought about Amara, the girl she had failed to save 20 years ago. She thought about Hope, the baby she had saved 3 weeks ago. She thought about all the patients who would walk through her doors in the years to come, each one carrying their own fears, their own pain, their own desperate need for someone to see them. And she made a promise, not to Marcus or Victoria or the memory of the dead, to herself. She would not run anymore. She would not hide. She would stand in the light and do the work she was born to do for as long as she had breath in her lungs and strength in her hands. Because that was what it meant to be a healer. Not to save everyone, but to never stop trying. Grace picked up her white coat and hung it carefully on the hook behind her door. Tomorrow, she would put it on again. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. And tomorrow, for the first time in 20 years, she would wake up looking forward to the day ahead. She turned off the lights and stepped out into the night, where Marcus and Victoria waited with baby Hope, ready to take her home. Not to the cramped apartment in the Bronx, to the guest house on their estate, where she now lived rent-free, surrounded by gardens and birdsong and a family that had chosen her. As the car pulled away from the clinic, Grace looked back at the building one last time. The sign above the door read Ashworth Community Clinic, but she knew the truth. This was Amara's clinic now. This was Tendai's clinic. This was her clinic, risen from the ashes of everything she had lost, built on the foundation of everything she had learned. And it was only the beginning. If this story moved you, if it made you think about the people in your life who go unnoticed, I need you to do something right now. Hit that like button. Leave a comment telling me what moment hit you the hardest. And subscribe to this channel so you never miss another story that will stay with you long after it ends. Because sometimes salvation comes from the most overlooked hands. And sometimes the cleaning woman knows more than all the doctors in the room. Remember that.